The Severe Setup is back. We're here. We're going to talk about a couple of hidden topics in hitting. We're going to talk about a couple of topics that are on our mind. Obviously, we're going to talk a little bit first about the One Championship card that's coming up this weekend to get you a little bit set up for that. And then we're going to talk about the current structure of MMA media and the current landscape of MMA media within the sport of mixed martial arts right now, which is in a very kind of dangerous and unusual position. And we'll get into that a little bit later on. But first, Harry, let's talk a multitude of fights coming up this Sunday. Unusual Sunday card. Superlek Takeru at the top in a flyweight kickboxing fight. Lots of grappling fights on this. A couple of mixed martial arts fights too. One Championship always throw in. I guess I've got to start this one talking about One Championships, about the heartbreak surrounding the pullout of Rodtang he was supposed to headline this fight with Takeru, and that would have been unbelievable. But Takeru is in against Superlek. Fair play. That will be a big one. That'll set up another big fight with Rodtang. We have Cade Rotolio on as a co-main event. Shinya Aoki versus Sage Norco. Yashiro Akiyama versus Nikki Holskin. Jesus, we're just going to talk about the madness of that fight in just a minute. Marat Grigorian takes on a Sitsong Pinong in another kickboxing fight. Two guys as well. I'm really going to be testing my pronunciations in this one, Harry. One Championship. Are you in or are you out with One Championship? What do you feel about it?
I'm in. I think, look, I don't think they're going to last as an organization, right? There seems to be some severe financial ramifications that are coming about after some of the loans and some of the investments and these sorts of things. But sure, look, MMA is not about making money, is it? Let's be honest. I think the thing that I love about One Championship is they have tailored an organization. They are quite literally a mixed martial arts organization, right? What they've done is they have taken, for the most part, some of the best kickboxers that are available, and they have matched them against some of the best kickboxers that are available. Obviously, there's been some back and forth with Ryzen and K1 and these sorts of things, but it feels like they are doing their best in order to match the best with the best in the kickboxing realm, in the footboxing realm, as Mr. Sean Sheehan would say. We then have some of the most elite grapplers in the world facing off with each other. Cade Rotolo and Tommy Langaka have fought previously. Obviously, we have Gary Tonin in and around there, which very storied grappler, now turned MMA fighter. And then they have some MMA fights, right? Then we have the Nikki Holskin custom rules type fights. And so I really like that they are open to all of the different individual arts, but also open to MMA in and of itself. They are willing to put on fights that fans would like to see. They are willing to pay the money in order to make the fights happen. And equally, they are willing to be open to a multitude of rule sets. So for sure, I'm in on one, for sure.
Oh, I'm big in on one. I get very nostalgic when I see one cards with these crazy kickboxing fights and stuff. It reminds me of the Pride days, and we got plenty to look forward to here. Like, I mean, look, it might not be everybody's thing, but if you haven't watched the one card, I would recommend go and watch one and then kind of make your decision based off that, because they do match the best kickboxers, Thai boxers, and grapplers and mixed martial arts as well. Maybe not the best mixed martial artists in the world, let's be real, but some really good talent in the mixed martial arts realm. Obviously, Superlek, Kiyomoto and Takeru are in the main event. That's just going to be a fantastic fight. Takeru, a really highly esteemed kickboxer. I'm not sure if you want to kind of talk about him for a second or you want to move into the co-main event, but look, that's going to be very, very interesting kickboxing fight. 135 in the bantamweight division. Takeru making his much awaited One Championship debut, and he's been kind of, turning a lot of heads over there in Asian kind of combat sports, and his move to one was considered a big deal. And of course, his fight with Rodtang that fell out was marked as one of the best stand-up fights that could be put on in modern day combat sports anyway, Harry.
Takeru is somebody that I have followed. There's I think his name is Sweet Punch Memories on Twitter, and he always puts all of the Thai stuff on. He's been banging on about Takeru for a long time. Kaposa's been banging on about Takeru for a long time. And then when Rodtang was matched with Takeru, everyone, even me, not the biggest foot boxing fan in the world, but even me was like, fuck me, I'm going to need to watch this, aren't I? And then obviously it fell apart, and so we're all heartbroken. But the MMA gods are clearly in relationship with the kickboxing gods, and, you know, we can't have fun things at the end of the day. But look, Takeru's move away from K1 Pride Rising is a big deal. I think it's a statement from One Championship that they are trying to cultivate the best fighters in the world in all of the different disciplines. And if we do eventually get to see Takeru Rodtang, then I'm definitely in. And also equally, the thing I like about One Championship, just to add one more thing, is they understand that losses don't define a fighter's career, right? Mm-hmm. And they will still go and make the biggest fights, regardless of whether a fighter has lost or otherwise.
100%. Cade Rotulio in the co-main event in a grappling fight with Tommy Laniker. Look, I've seen Cade Rotulio, one half of the Rotulio brothers, very esteemed grapplers, you know, world championship level grapplers. Tommy Laniker, not too familiar with him, and you're no better man to talk about both of these guys, Harry. Look at you. Harry's like, I'm not doing the severe setup anymore. This guy's never heard of Tommy Laniker. Tell me about him, sir. Why should we be excited about this one?
Tommy Langacker is a multiple-time European medalist, European champion, and European medalist, world medalist in the gi. He was primarily a gi player for 10 years of his career, and then decided he wanted to switch over and do ADCC. He got second in his first ADCC trials and will go and compete again for ADCC trials in, I think it's Bulgaria, in a couple of months. He is, without a shadow of a doubt, one of the best grapplers in the world, gi or no gi. It's very, very, very impressive to watch him go from a very gi-orientated game to a no-gi-orientated game. People will potentially know him from competing against Gilbert Burns in the gi. He beat Gilbert Burns in the gi in a very, very, very entertaining match. That was on a grappling show called Polaris. But these two have fought before, and Cade Rotolo won via a very, very, very split, very, very tight decision. And so they're doing it again because why not? It was a fun grappling match all around. But Cade Rotolo and his twin brother, Ty Rotolo, are both elite level grapplers, and as is Tommy Langacker. So where we have seen both Rotolos and Mikey Musumeci handled some less than elite grapplers in order to build their stock and get a couple of highlight reels, make no mistake about it, Tommy Langacker is the best of the best.
Nice. Looking forward to that one. Next one, 170. In 2024, we still have Shinya Aoki fighting. He's going in there against Sage Northcutt. My goodness. Harry waves to the skies in excitement. Look at Aoki, an absolute legend of the game. Like, to still be competing there, 40 years of age, coming in against the Sage Northcutt too. I mean, I think it's a good fight on both sides here. I think, you know, a winnable fight. Obviously, I feel for Sage Northcutt coming in here, but he's not being thrown to the wolves at all. And, you know, Aoki is going to be difficult. He's tricky, obviously, off his back, tricky with the leg locks, tricky in general with his grappling, Harry. What do you think of this one, Sage Northcutt and Shinya Aoki?
Sage Northcutt, if he can't win this one, then the whole thing was a pipe dream anyway, right? Like, we are talking about one of the most mismanaged and rushed fighting prospects I think we had. Massive kickboxing career, massive karate career, or at least a massive skill set in kickboxing and or karate. Comes in, has the UFC career that he has, goes over to one, just gets absolutely destroyed by Cosmo Alexandre. And then,
he did get thrown to the wolves in that fight. That was ridiculous. He got broken up so badly in that fight, which only lasted 29 seconds, that he almost didn't fight. Like, he almost never made it back. And his last fight against Ahmed Mushaba, he won by a heel hook in round one. That was his first fight back since that loss. So that was a good win. Obviously, coming in,
right?
He did get dropped in that and then recovered and locked in that heel hook. So I think one thing about this fight is that, you know, he's not going to have to worry too much about Shinya Aoki's power on the feet or him landing too much shot on the feet. So I think that in its own right is a bit of a bonus for Sage Northcutt coming in here.
Definitely. And if Sage is not athlete enough to be able to muscle and explode his way out of any grappling experiences that he gets into with Shinya, then that's a significant problem. But this is a lovely matchup for Sage Northcutt. But in the same vein, if Shinya goes out and beats Sage Northcutt, then you best believe that the fans are going to be absolutely enamored by it. Just rapturous, right? Rapturous.
Absolutely. Another mixed martial arts fight that is on the card, 155 pounds, Gary Tonin versus Martin Gwynn. What do you think of Gary Tonin's transition into mixed martial arts? 8-1 right now. Coming in against a dangerous enough Martin Gwynn, who has some good wins over some stiff competition in the past as well. Coming off a win over here from Leonardo Gassotti in one Fight Night 7. So Tonin obviously coming back off of that defeat, that knockout 2 fights ago, or two fights, MMA fights ago. He's been in there in the grappling department, obviously, since that. But 2 wins over Johnny Nunes, Shamil Gazanov in his last fight, coming in against Martin Gwynn. What do you think of, first of all, his transition to mixed martial arts and this fight then after the fact?
I think in his sport grappling career, he wasn't really known as a guard player, right? He was proficient with his leg lock attacks. He was proficient sort of all the way around, but he was very much a scrambly, wanted to be on top, could wrestle a little piece, could do a bit of everything type grappler, which made him a fan favorite in the grappling world. Absolutely. But it certainly lends itself a little bit easier with MMA, right? Now, in the very, very, very beginning of his MMA career, what we saw was he would dive on leg locks, pull guard, these sorts of things. But it feels as though as he has progressed through his grappling, his MMA career, obviously a lot of the most poignant and most dangerous attacks that he has are submissions, right? But he is far, 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 far better at piecing together an overarching MMA game before we get to, I'm just going to duck my head, dive on a takedown, and search for a leg lock, you know? And I think the last 2 performances showed that he has a little bit else in the tank other than just, I just have to submit this guy or I'm going to get whacked, right? The Tan Lee performance, 1, Tan Lee is a very good fighter, and 2, I think Gary's game plan for that was horrific, and so he got dealt a very handy first round sub-minute loss. These things happen in MMA. He is certainly somebody that I trust to learn from a loss as well. He won't take that and be like, sure, look, I'll just pull guard and pull double outside and try and heel hook every single other fella. He will definitely take that and say, okay, well, I tried it and it didn't work, and so I'm going to mix it up a little piece and do something different. And so I'm very interested to see what he comes in with against a Martin Nguyen, who, you know, looks a little bit like a 50-50 fighter in his last couple of performances, but has definitely got some wins against some good names, but has also taken some losses from some very reputable names too, right? So fair play to both men. I feel like, again, this is a fight against an experienced fighter that they're trying to set Gary up for with a win, you know?
100%. Last but not least, you love a little bit of mad bastardry from time to time, Harry. And Yoshihiro, let me get it right. Let me get Sexyama's name right. Yoshihiro Akiyama is going in there against Nikki Holzken in a custom rules kind of a mixed martial arts / kind of kickboxing fight. That man is pushing 50 and still going in there and challenging himself. Is there anything that Sexyama can't do?
I mean, he did basically the fucking, I can't remember what that show was called, but it was a Korean.
I watched it. It was like the
the
top 100 athletes
top 100,
or something like
that. Was top 100,
top 100, yeah.
And what was crazy about that top 100, and this is absolutely nothing to do with this fight whatsoever, I've railed this entirely, is the amount that every single person in there respected
them. Yeah.
Like, it was insane. Like, people were walking in, like random people walking. I'd never heard of any of the cunts, right? But you got military people, you got bodybuilders, you got judo people, you got you had sumo people, you had acrobats, you had this, you had that, you had dancers, you had all these people who were just, you know, phenomenal athletes. And then as they all sort of filtered in, Sexyama was one of the last ones in, right? And they were like shocked, like, oh my God, I can't believe he is here, right? And he walked in, and even the challenge that he had when he made it to the first round, there was a second round challenge, which he had to like win a ball or something like that.
Yeah,
and
the sand ball challenge, yeah.
Right. And your man said to him, is there any chance we can use MMA rules here? Can we smack each other up a little bit? And Sexyama's like, are you sure, big man? And the guy's like, yes, please. It would be an honor to fight you properly. And Sexyama's like, okay, big man. Now, Sexyama eventually lost that challenge, right? But just the level of respect you must have in order to get in there in this random challenge and potentially sacrifice your brain health just to have shared a combat experience with somebody like Sexyama really speaks to exactly the type of man that he is. Anyway, he's fucking 50,000 years old and he's going to fight Nikki Holtzkin, who's just a savage anyway. And this is elite level mad bastardry.
I love it. I love it. Great breakdown there. And yeah, look, at One Championship will be on 165. You'll check it out this weekend. I love watching the One cards. Looking forward to this one as well. It's on a rare Sunday night. We'll check it out. We'll do it. But we're moving on to another kind of a pressing topic, one that, you know, we want to discuss. In a week that Alexander Cayley was criticized for asking legit questions at a UFC press conference by Sean Strickland and all the rest of Twitter, who just jumped on him after that. You know, it raises some alarms in the current state of mixed martial arts media and people's general understanding of what media is and what their responsibilities are. And I know, Harry, you think very, very strongly about this topic, and I'm curious to hear your opinions on it.
Where do I start? I mean, I think this in and of itself is poignant in that we've just discussed One Championship, right? And there was a lot of excitement in that conversation. There was a lot of intrigue. And that is one of the beautiful things about MMA, right? Is that we have an ability to discuss one of the things that we love the most, which is those fights, those athletes, and the way in which they are going to portray their skills, right? However, as always, there is a dark side to MMA, and I feel like that dark side has been growing drastically over the last sort of 6 to 8 months, and it really comes to a head. You know, if we go all the way back to Conor McGregor making comments about Khabib and his family and his religion and these sorts of things, as always, there is a line, right? And I think that when promotions start to promote the line crossings and use them and start to normalize them in that space and use them as marketing materials, it makes it very, very, very difficult for fans to push back on, but equally for media to push back on. And specifically when Dana has often publicly denigrated the media, banned media members before for not really bannable offenses, right? Let's be honest, and constantly has had a very small circle of journalists, if we can call them that, but media members that go in and ask Dana specific questions, and they don't cover specific topics. And if they were to cover specific topics, it feels as though they wouldn't get another chance to have that same position. That sets a precedent, right? And there are people that are outside of that. The people like SevereMMA, people like Luke Thomas, for the most part, for good or for bad, people like Ariel Helwani. There are people who will try to report and speak on issues occurring in the MMA space. However, it feels as though both in the societal generation that we're in, but also in the MMA landscape that we are in, promotions aren't looking to have relationships with the media. Promotions are looking to have relationships with social media members. And what I mean by that is, and again, we don't need to name any names, right? People know who they are, but there are media members or social media members and / influencers who are conducting interviews or creating content in a way that does not adhere to the very strict, very unbiased, and very cold in a lot of ways nature of what media should be, right? And what that does, I think, and I'll round off here.
Continue. No rush.
Is it gives the fans a fallacy of what media should be, and it allows the UFC to direct the traffic of conversation to a place in which suits them as perfectly as possible. Because why can't Alexander Cayley ask the questions about Sean Strickland? Why shouldn't Dana White be questioned about the lawsuit at a press conference and be made to answer questions, right? To be repeatedly asked questions about specific harsh topics. Why should it be that if a reporter asks a question about free speech or this or that or the other, Dana can say whatever it is he wants and not be challenged on that? I don't think that's healthy for MMA. I don't think that's healthy for the UFC.
It definitely isn't healthy, and I think it's kind of more difficult for us to kind of digest, Harry, as guys who have been watching mixed martial arts for a number of years now, and we came up with the Ariel Helwanis and the Chad Dundases and the Ben Folks and the Josh Grosses and the other lady that got banned as well. What was her name? Oh man, her name escapes me. Oh,
here you're not going to get.
I know, but look at it's like coming up through that and seeing proper journalism, which is just being eked out under the kind of ruling of Dana White, it's been worrying for the last number of years, and it's accelerated, I think, over the last two or 3 years. And you know, the dangers of that with the progression of the sport is very alarming right now. Like, and I guess where I'm going with is like where is it leading us right now, and what does it mean for the overall health of mixed martial arts if these questions aren't being answered, or basically not being asked? You know, I think that's the more problem. It's not about the questions that are not being answered. You can ask a question and it can't be answered, but at least you're asking that question. But we're kind of leading down a rocky road to these questions not being asked, real journalism being irked out of mixed martial arts and being replaced with this kind of clickbait, kind of social influencer kind of questions. And yeah, I don't like it too. We're stuck in the middle of it right here at Severe. We don't do that ourselves, and we try and kind of, you know, do it the best that we can based off what we've learned from Graham and from Sean and stuff like that. But where is it going? Where is it leading us, Harry?
So I think if we look at the most dystopian potential, right, it's that independent media are no longer available for conversation with athletes, conversation with members of the UFC. And that is a very, very, very dark time should that occur, because it means that the UFC can go unchecked. MMA, frankly, can go unchecked. And that's a problem, right? That's a significant problem, because coming out of MMA, coming out of the UFC specifically, is things like power slap and these sorts of just horrendous tropes of combat sports. I say that in inverted commas for the people just listening. And, you know, I worry about the state of mixed martial arts without a unbiased and willing media, because you need an ability to report on the surroundings of MMA with no fear of being removed or excluded from the space. And if you mention, you know, you mentioned some of the names there.
Loretta Hunt was the name of that woman too. Loretta Hunt, that she was like one of the first high profile. Her and Josh Gross that were actively banned from UFC for asking those kind of questions back in the day, which kind of set the precedent of what we have right now. It's that fear for the likes of yourself and myself, you know, who kind of get into this. You know, you want to kind of build yourself up and go to these big events and ask those questions, but you are there with the lingering kind of worry over you that if you push the boundaries too far, that you might not get another opportunity to do that. You might be put on a blacklist. You might not be given an opportunity to ask questions. So it is very, very worrying, and it's leading down a very murky waters now and what we can do. But it's like, yeah, that's what I was going to ask you next. What can we do to try and fix this? And if you're a consumer, if someone is listening to this, if you're an MMA fan, obviously going and supporting the websites, and not saying necessarily whatever website you want to support, whether it's SevereMMA, whether it's someone else, getting that proper journalism and then taking. That's what we kind of grew up watching the sport with, was that legit journalism, which kind of gave us a realistic overview of what mixed martial arts is. And I don't think there's a realistic overview of what it is right now in this world. But you're saying there is hope. There is hope.
I think so, because, you know, a lot of the time I feel like I shout into the void a little piece, right? And I know that other media members that are trying to do this thing as honestly as possible also feel like they're shouting into the void. But, you know, the other day I got a tweet, a response to one of my articles that said, you know, is this, I can't believe it. Is this honest journalism, right? Is this honest reporting? Like, I can't believe I'm seeing this in 2024. Thanks so much. Like, you've earned a follow, or what, you know, whatever it is. And so what that tells me is that regardless of, you know, maybe you only affect the 5% or the 10%, but as with all things, I think in life, it swings one way and swings the other. There have been heavy media presences, like proper traditional media presences in mixed martial arts. It's seeming like it's dying out now. And I believe if there are still a few people that continue on through the mud, through the trees, through the rain, through the wind, that eventually it will tip back the other way. And if I get comments like that, and if people that comment on your interviews and the old triangle and things like that, then there is a small section of people that are still looking for media done as honestly as possible. And that's not to say we're perfect, right? We're absolutely not perfect. There is absolutely things that we could do to improve, I am sure. But when the intention is not to create content that just paints the UFC in glory, or just is a marketing mouthpiece for the UFC, and make no mistake, we talk about almost every UFC card there is, whether it's on the setup or on the breakdown, but we do so in a way that we are not afraid to say our opinions, regardless of the repercussions. And I think that's the way it should be. And so as long as there are people like Ian and Sean and Andy and Quilcher and the other Sean, Mr. Denny, and, you know, these sorts of people.
And Harry, don't forget yourself.
Yeah, fair play. As long as there are people out there that are still willing to speak their mind openly and be unashamed of the repercussions, then there is still hope. You know, I do.
Yeah, 100%. It's like, we mentioned Alexander Cayley in the question that he asked, and he brought forth some comments that Sean Strickland made about the LGBTQ plus community, and was berated from it by Sean Strickland. And, you know, Sean Strickland crawled back under his rock when he was answered that question. And, you know, everybody wanted to jump to his defense and kind of come and beat up Alexander online. And I didn't like that whatsoever, because he was asking a legitimate question. The only thing that Alexander did right there was ask Sean Strickland a question about something that came out of his mouth in the past. And if you're willing to spew that shit out of your mouth, you've got to be responsible for any questions that come after that as well. And there's this narrative that's been created, number one, by Dana White, who will go and will kind of chew up and spit out some reporters who do ask those questions. And he does that ever so smartly, because he wants to deter other people from doing that. You don't want to get chewed out by Dana White. Well, you know, he's done quite a good job in kind of being able to kind of create that narrative inside the UFC. And like, in certain ways, I mean, to take a real turn here, it's almost admirable what he's been able to do, and very, very media savvy what he's been able to do. And I can tell you, I've been in a room when he's been answering questions, and that man can hold down a room when media are in there and asking questions. He just has that air and that presence about him, and he just knows how to spin stories, to spin opinions, and to push back in some difficult times over some difficult questions. But, you know, we talk about the likes of me and you, or whoever else is at Severe MMA, who are only like, you know, I only consider myself a minnow in a pond of a lot larger fish in the mixed martial arts community, to be honest. But what we need more than everything else, Harry, is, you know, the Aaron Bronstetters who went out and asked Dana White about that UFC anti-law trust. We need him asking those questions. We need Ariel to stay doing what he's doing and pushing back. You know, I do feel with Ariel, I would like him to be a little bit more balanced in it. It seems to be always steered to one side, but that's understandable. He's been through the ringer with the UFC, but we need these questions being asked and competing to be asked, like continue to be asked by these big journalists. And the sad reality is a lot of these guys are not welcome into events anymore, and they are not going to events anymore for that reason. And it's a very sad situation. And I don't know, you have hope. I'm not so sure, but like, we'll always continue to do what we're doing. And any final thoughts on this overall, and maybe the landscape of mixed martial arts in general, in terms of a lot of things are turning to digital over the written word right now, is very, very worrying as well when it comes to the mixed martial arts landscape. And this is coming from a guy who hasn't fucking sat down and written an article in months as well. But I mean, we've seen the benefits. You are a guy that's producing written content each and every week, and I'm sure we'll continue to do so. Where do you see the value in written content in the current state of mixed martial arts media?
I don't see that there's any, frankly. Like, I write that article because I enjoy it. I have no idea how many people read it. I don't ask Sean how many people read it. I don't ask Graham how many people read it, because I don't want to know, frankly. I sometimes have a conversation with you about it. I sometimes have a conversation with Shawnee. I sometimes have a conversation with Spencer about it. And if three of my friends are willing to read an article that I've spent a couple of hours on, it's fine by me. I got no problem with that whatsoever. And so it's very heartwarming to know that other people read it. I'm very, very, very grateful that other people will take, 10, 15 minutes of their day and read something that I've written. That means a lot, right? But in terms of where do I see written content, I don't, right? I really don't. I couldn't tell you the last thing that I have, other than the John Nash antitrust lawsuit stuff. I read all that because I think it's really important to read all of that, right?
100%.
But I don't read analysis. One, because I don't want to cloud my own mind, but I also don't read breakdown or preview or any of that stuff. I just don't read it, right? Like, I very rarely consume MMA content. One, because I think, Shawnee and Luke Thomas equally, way back when, gave a piece of advice, which was, if you read other people's stuff, you're going to find that you're mimicking other people's stuff. And I really used to like Dan Hardy's breakdown stuff. And then when I started to do my own breakdown stuff, I realized that I was just spouting the same stuff that Dan Hardy spouted. And that's just of no use to anyone, really, right? It's not of any use or fair to Dan. He's put the work in, and it's not use or fair to me because it's not my own opinion. You know what I mean? So I think that as long as, just to pivot back to your first point, I think as long as people are still willing to listen, consume, watch our content and watch the content of channels that are similar to us, because there are lots, right? Then MMA doesn't necessarily need to go to a UFC event, right? Because I think fans are wise enough somewhere and on some level that they enjoy the press conferences, they enjoy the media days, they enjoy this, they enjoy that. And I think they find it refreshing when a real question is asked. And so if that were to go missing, I do think that would leave a tangible hole that fans would be aware of. And there might be a call to have it back. And if not, then I believe in the fans that will then go and direct traffic to the places with which they can find exactly what they're looking for. And I think a testament to that, and this is the final thing I'll say on the whole thing, is the SevereMMA podcast, the biggest, the big podcast as we call it, has never been stronger in terms of numbers. And you best believe that Sean and Graham are never just shining the bollocks of the UFC. They will give them their credit when they deserve it, and they deserve it a lot of the time. They are an amazing organization for many, many, many reasons. However, if there is a problem and if there is something to be called upon, you best believe they'll call upon it.
And I think, in fairness to myself and yourself, over the last number of years, would like to do the same. But we're picking up, what's that information, and I think reasons why we joined SevereMMA is because of that, because we're not going to be told not to do that, number one, and we're going to be given a platform to be able to do it, which is quite refreshing. And I think this actual conversation as a whole is very, very important coming into the year in 2024, where we have the antitrust lawsuit coming into play, and we will have a lot of potential questions that could be asked around that lawsuit. And Aaron Bronstetter is the only person I've heard ask about that lawsuit as well. I was absolutely kicking myself when he did, because I had the opportunity to ask it only last month myself and never did. But look, we'll get the opportunities to ask other questions on other days, and we just got to stay doing what we're doing, and that's it. And I enjoy it. I'm not going to be apologetic, but I think you know, we're in a kind of a time right now where there's a lot of talk about free speech and everything like that. And I realize the importance of free speech, but we're in a lot of gray areas where free speech is turning into hateful speech and bigot and other kind of things that is unsavory. And you kind of mentioned the line there, and I mean, the line is kind of proverbially set by the person who wants to set it. I mean, one person's line might not necessarily be another person's line, but we've got some big fights in the past and many years in the past without talking about, people's families or people's religion. Fans want to tune in to see fights. And they want, yeah, okay, I'm going to kick the shit out of you in round 1 and round 2. I'm going to finish you. Yeah, we can digest that, but it hasn't been great, really, Harry, hasn't it, over the last number of whiles? And I think, do you think that this is just a period of time that we're going through in mixed martial arts now, or do you think that this kind of wave of the dark side of mixed martial arts, if you want to call that, in terms of how fights are promoted and what fighters are saying ahead of these fights, may pass in the future?
I think it's a reflection of where society is right now. I think it's a reflection of what the world is gearing toward from a content perspective. There is a lot of value in shock, right? And I think that when you look at things like TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, very often the content that is doing the best is the thing that emits the most shock value, or the most anger value, or the most emotional recourse, if you will, right? It's the thing that forces people to react, because more often than not, if somebody likes something, they will consume that thing, and internally they'll say, well, that was nice, or I enjoyed that, or that was good, right? And then they'll move on, right? It's very rare that there is a call to action for something good, but it's very easy to have a call to action for something that makes you feel negatively. And I think that when you look at the UFC, when you look at MMA in general, and the way that these fights are sold, there has been a pivot. And that pivot has been to something that emits more of an emotional value, that is more of a call to action, that is more of there's more of a shock factor. And so is this something that we're just going through? Yes. Do I think this is something that can change? Yeah, I think it can change. I think it's going to get much worse before it gets better, because I do think that even for somebody like Dana White, there is a line, right? There is absolutely a line, even for somebody like Dana White, who professes to promote free speech and all of this. And I don't think this is the right place to have that debate, but I generally side with you on the line that there is, as essentially a CEO, he's not a CEO, but he kind of is, as a president, as somebody that has a large influence over what fighters are able to say and what they're not able to say, or at least what they're encouraged to say and what they're discouraged to say, he can have a greater influence for the greater good, right? Because
and he once did, Harry. Remember when we had this?
Recently.
Remember, yeah, but they've had this kind of. They released a Pride T-shirt. They said, remember, Cowboy Cerrone came out and said some distasteful comments before, and he said, that's unacceptable, and we don't want hate speech. And then somewhat, just like a flick of a switch, it's turned into quite the opposite way. Because you know what? At the end of the day, when it comes down to Dana White and the UFC, money talks. Money talks. And I didn't even say it. You're already doing the money sign, and the UFC and Dana White will always follow the money, no matter whose feelings are hurt, no matter what happens or how it makes the sport look. Very interesting times. Good topic of conversation. That was the Severe setup. Head on over there and go over and talk to Harry Powell at BJJ_Harry Powell. Send him a nice message about his articles. He deserves it. He deserves the love. He's one of the lone soldiers out there doing written content on a consistent basis. And fair play to him, and fair play to you for listening. Hit the like button, the subscribe button. We'll chat to you all next week on the Severe Setup.